looking for an answer to the simple question of why residents of that city continue to prey on tourists.
Authorities in Florida were shocked by the latest incident.
Hunters, they're hunting for robbery victims. They could have been your family. They could have been anybody in the community.
We've heard terms used that these people perhaps acted like animals. I think that would be an insult to the animals.
Once again, violent crime has tarnished Florida's image.
Today on Bets and Badges, we have the pleasure of interviewing and speaking with a colleague, a person who has seen the worst humanity has to offer, an incredible human being, a person who spent over 30 years in the City of Miami Police Department, almost all 30 in homicide. We have the pleasure of speaking with Confessor Gonzalez. How are you, sir?
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. I am Robert Asencio, and I have my colleague and co-host, retired police chief, military historian, David Magnusson. What's up, brother?
Doing great with two good friends. It's great to see you again, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Man, I remember, I'm going to call it Confessor Cheeky, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So my nickname is Cheeky, and we'll discuss that. But yeah, nicknames that I'm very proud of. So
I've always known you as Cheeky, right?
Yeah.
I knew you as Cheeky before I knew you as Confessor. But I remember we had a shooting, and I remember you from many scenes before this, but we had a shooting in Miami High. And initially it was a whodunit. And it was a small caliber firearm was used. Some kids were, I think they were either kids or adults, but they were young people. They were gambling. I think that's the way the story went. They were gambling. Somebody got pissed at somebody else, and Lord and behold, shots rang out, right? And I remember the victim was close to death, and then you coming up with a couple of your partners, Eddie Gonzalez, Eddie, right?
Eddie Martinez.
Eddie Martinez,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and a few others. And then within a few minutes, you guys, first of all, when you got on the scene, you already knew half the people there, the kids, right?
Right.
The community. So that was really, really cool for me. I was a new sergeant at the time. And then within a very short period of time, you got a lead. And you're like, come on, let's go. And I remember riding with you. We went over to Little Havana. So it was a little apartment. And there was a person there, a young man, and you spoke to him. And the rapport that you had with that guy, I mean, they're built right then and there with that person was just amazing to me. It was like instant. So much so that he copped to the shooting, but he also told you where the gun was. He had hid it underneath a stove. You probably don't remember, but that was just amazing. It was like the police from the moment of dispatch, the moment his crime is solved was maybe 2 hours. Something that's seldom done, and that's because of relations. So, I wanted to talk to you about that. Thank you. Because you made my life, you were able to help me clear that case, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's like, growing up in Miami, raised by a single mom, and very limited means of income. So where we lived, oftentimes was not the best of neighborhoods. Mostly in Wynwood. I also lived in the Larchmont projects as a kid.
Larchmont, yeah.
And so the school of life taught me a lot. And when I became a police officer, that growing up experience, exposed to those neighborhoods and dealing with being part of that in a way, even though I now became a cop, was a tool that I had available to me that most cops don't have. And I used it very wisely, thank God. And it helped me communicate with the community because most crimes, as we know, do occur in inner cities, in the rough neighborhoods, and no one wants to talk to the police. Coming from there, I had the ability to be able to go back in many ways and communicate. And that's how I built many rapports with a lot of people.
Legendary, him and the homicide units. And I considered myself a good street cop. And when I worked the North End, we get calls from, we didn't have cell phone, if someone on the radio or call the complaint room, be guys like you and the rest of the squad up there, the Burmasters, Eddie, we're looking for this guy up in the North End. And Kinch and I rode together for a long time. We find it was exciting to get a call from them.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So legendary work. So
Right.
let's take a walk down memory lane, if you will.
Yeah.
City of Miami. City of Miami has made incidents that occurred in the city of Miami have made not just national news but global news at times. And you were part of history making in solving some of those cases.
In Miami, im US-Staat Florida.
News of the killing was broadcast in Germany.
You know, we go back to, what was it, 90s? The tourist robberies, and there were some robberies that resulted in murder. You want to talk a little bit about those experiences?
Absolutely. So probably one of the first tourist robberies, very sad story, that I ended up being the lead investigator on, happened April 3rd, 1993 at 6th Court Northwest 62nd Street. The exit ran from 95 North.
Right by the school, right?
Right by the school. And it was a German tourist, Barbara Jensen, had just arrived in Miami with her mother, elderly mother, and her very young son. I think he was only a few years old. And she was driving north of 95 and she was lost. So this is, again, things that we learned later on. And she got off on 62nd Street, pulled over to the side of the road. Back in those days, we didn't have GPS. So she was looking at her map. So you had a bunch of groups of robbers out there, and they would target tourists. And they knew the tourists because they had a rental car, and the tag had a Z. At the time, the tag began with a Z. And they would call it, let's go Zing.
Mm-hmm.
So they saw her leaving the airport, and they would go by the airport and prey on the tourists. And they saw two white females with a kid, and they followed her. So what they did was, when she got off on 62nd Street and she parked, they bumped her car, which is, again, part of the technique they use. She got out like anybody would. Hey, you hit my car. And as she's talking to them, one of them grabs her purse and runs back into the car. I think instinctively she went after him and grabbed the purse. And as the car was taking off, she slipped and fell. And the right rear tire ran over her head and killed her. And so that's how that case started, you know. And what's interesting is I was the duty detective. I was on call that night. And I got called, and I was told we had a female that was shot in the head. And I was lucky. I had a great partner who had been my mentor, who had been a big brother to me. Rest in peace, my brother, John Spear. This man taught me a lot. And to this day, I worship him. So John responded out, because John had been my trainer in homicide, but now he was my partner, and that's been years gone by since I went. But we still had a great relationship, developed a great friendship. And we have a lot of blood on the scene, and we're being told, oh, she was shot in the head. So, you know, you go to the scene as far as your first steps. And then we had to go to the hospital to check on, you routinely do that, quote, the body, because, you know, that's how you find yourself sometimes dehumanizing in a way to deal with it. And we got to the hospital. We went to look at the victim, rest in peace, Mrs. Jensen. And John noticed that she had some tire marks on her face. And he points them out to me. I go, holy smoke. So then and there we decided, well, this is, she wasn't shot. And of course, we work closely with medical examiner's office, because in homicide, it's one big team. Like David mentioned, work closely with patrol. You work closely with the state attorney's office. You work closely with medical examiner's office. We all become one team. Work closely with the other agencies, like in your case, when you were the school board. You know, and it's not you. It's one big team. You join all those resources. And that's how that case started.
I mean, you were on the road, right, at that time, and
during those robberies, I was in PIO, so that became busy. I was only sworn at that time in PIO. They beefed it up after I got promoted and went back out to the road. But yeah, and it was a busy time.
Was that before Bill Schwartz?
Yes. He came in after I promoted out, and I went back up to the north, and then I did the robbery. Yeah. And media was camping out every time there was a lead that they think arrests were going to be made. They were camping out in the PI, in the media relations office. It was nonstop. Unfortunately, there was another one afterwards as well, a couple months later, of another German tourist, and then up somewhere in Jacksonville, unrelated to the city, obviously, at a rest stop. I know Governor Childs was angry about the whole thing. I mean,
because it became a political. It became not just an economic nightmare.
Tourism was getting nailed. It was a problem. You had the Paradise Lost even earlier with Time Magazine. It was a lot of things that were just going on. But the tourist robberies, I mean, they were almost in the thousands. You're talking about a massive number of tourist robberies throughout all of Miami-Dade. Well, it was Dade County back then, and it was not safe. It was not safe to be a tourist.
Well, as a result, legislation changed.
Correct.
The legislation was enacted that changed the tags, the Z, right?
Yeah.
And the maps. I know that when tourists come into South Florida now, for so many decades now, they're given a map, but they're also warned about against stopping and reading the map in public places.
Didn't they go RICO on them on the tourist robbers?
Not on that. There were others that were RICO,
right.
but this particular one were three offenders. So a lot of changes took place, like you mentioned, including the expressway signs were changed to be more clear and things of that nature. But going back to what Magnusson mentioned, very wisely, we knew the media attention. This is a very high-profile case internationally known, and the Department of Tourism, the governor's office, everyone, talking about pressure. I was working 36 hours straight on this case, and we had no leads. We had nothing. Our only eyewitness was the victim's mother, who did not speak English, elderly lady, and it was dark, and her son, who was a few years old, also only spoke German. And you're trying to put this together. So one of our first investigative steps we did was, hey, let's keep it out in the media. And the media wanted it, and my partner and I, and of course, through the support of our agency heads, released the information. We kept it alive. Kept her picture on the tube. Her name was out there. And we tried to do a reenactment with her son. It was kind of difficult because of his age and the language barrier. We worked closely with the German embassy back then. We kept them involved, and they were very helpful. They really helped us a lot. And we had nothing. And you do the typical research, look at all the other robberies, and you look for the MOs and patterns and things of that nature. But ironically, what made the case for us was the fact that we kept it alive in the media. And how this came to play was, we had a lady call us. There was $100,000 reward. So we're getting all kinds of people calling with all kinds of tips. And we were all over the place following tips. We had a task force and talk about, tips that led nowhere. So the lady calls and says that she found an address label belonging to our victim in her purse. Now, how wacko does that sound? You go, oh, no, not another one. But, we followed every lead. And so John Spear and I, we went to meet the lady and go up to her house. She lived over there off of Bay Shore and 17th Street.
In the city of Miami.
In the city of Miami. And she didn't need the money. She was well off. So she didn't need the reward even. And we go talk to her, and she hands us an address label with our victim's name or her Germany address. Now, how in the world did this lady, So she tells us this story. She was going down Northeast 2 Avenue in the area of 29th Street when she was robbed. They took her purse, right? The way things are. And a couple of black males in a blue car. And she called 911, and of course the dispatcher puts out a bolo for the car. Well, as luck would have it, one of the units comes up on a car at Miami Avenue, about 28th Street, that matches the description, a blue Cadillac. And the car had run out of gas, and you have one black male inside the car and two black males pushing it. When the cop comes up on it, they all take off running. The cops catch them. The victim's purse is inside the car. They identify them. They arrest them for that robbery and give the victim her purse back.
Mm-hmm.
So what we determined later on happened was, what they would do is they would take the victim's belongings and throw them out on the car and go through them. When the cops came up on them in this particular robbery, they threw everything back in the purse to throw it out the door. Apparently, they had done the same thing with the tourists from Germany, and they inadvertently had dropped some of her address labels on the car floor. And so now, when they pick up all this stuff from this victim, they picked up some of the other victims' address labels and put them in this victim's purse. When the victim goes home and looking at her purse, bingo, here we are. So we, of course, now that's making a lot of sense, and we go do a search warrant on the car right away. And I'll be darned, on the car floor, there's a bunch of address labels belonging to our German victim. So now we knew exactly how it happened. And we were able to identify the offenders, interrogate them, get confessions, and they were subsequently convicted.
The German government put out a bulletin to their citizens warning them to against traveling to specifically to South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So your emotions are, you're working all these hours straight. You're freaking the pressure of the bosses. We have to solve this. We have to solve this. How are you feeling?
So, you get so focused when you're working on homicide that, the pressure from the bosses is more like a distractor, because any good homicide investigator knows that they know what they're doing. And they don't need to be micromanaged. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, the pressure from above does sidetrack you a little bit, but you're able to kind of refocus on what you're doing. The emotions are, all over the place. It's heartbreaking to deal with the victim's mother and her son. It was really, really sad. Then the victim's husband arrived, and of course, he was more supportive of his mother-in-law and his son. Identifying this evidence that you knew, wow, this is good stuff. And now you have identified the people that had that evidence, and you have identified the location that it came from. Of course, you're thinking forensics. You're thinking not just, solving of the case. You're looking ahead, because any detective knows that you have to prepare yourself for the court proceedings, because the first thing that good attorneys do, they try to look for loopholes to suppress evidence. So you try to anticipate all that and do as much as you can, and make sure that regardless of what they say, we do cover the bases, and we make sure we stay within the parameters of the law.
Now you're going to talk to these subjects, right? You have the subjects identified or potentially identified, and you're going to talk to them. How do you maintain your composure in that these guys were committing some serious, it wasn't just robberies, it was the shootings, the beatings, the personal attacks. I mean, they're freaking monsters.
So again, that's when I discussed earlier my
already at predators.
Yes, they were. And I felt that my background, the way I grew up, helped me a lot, because I didn't feel intimidated dealing with people from the street, or thugs, like you call them. I felt comfortable. Been there. Lived that life as a kid. Not that I, thank God, was ever involved in any crimes, because I had older brothers that, even though I lived in a rough neighborhood, looked out for me, because I would get my butt kicked if they ever found out I was holding a joint. But anyway, but one thing that I always say is, when you talk to a target, a suspect, no need to be, even though it's a confrontational interrogation, no need to be confrontational up to a point. You start a conversation treating people like who they are, with respect. Because I was raised by a single mom, And that's one thing that she taught her children, in that respect, and something that I believe to this day. And I am blessed that my children are the same way, very respectful. And you build a rapport. But in building a rapport, when you are trying to interrogate a subject, is also not being abrasive, but being firm and letting them know, hey, listen, I know what's going on, because they're going to lie to you. And I always tell people, and I have had defense attorneys ask me, why would someone waive their rights and talk to you? Well, that's because it becomes a chess game. And they think they're such good liars. And you are what stands between their freedom and jail. And if they can convince you they didn't do it, they have eliminated that risk. And they no longer have to keep looking over their backs if you're there. So they'll do it. They'll take that risk. If you're a good interviewer, a good interrogator, you can overcome that. Especially if you're doing an interrogation, and you have gathered all your facts. Because one thing when you interrogate a suspect, don't bluff them if you don't have the full hand. Okay, if they call you on it and you're BSing, you're done. And once you lose credibility, it's over. So yeah, building that rapport was important, and make them understand that it's not personal. And of course, you have to, when you're going to interrogate someone, especially in a custodial interrogation, make someone aware of their Miranda rights and provide them the form to sign it. And we got past that, and then of course it became the chess game. I wasn't there. Yes, you were. No, I wasn't. It wasn't me. And then to eventually, after a while, and again, different investigators have different interview techniques. Mine is I like to keep notes of what they tell me. But so that later on I can come say, no, but you told me this earlier, and things of that nature. I'm not going to divulge all my techniques here, but
that could be like a 101 or 202 for detectives. Maybe it'll be a next episode.
So it worked out. My partner, of course, John Spear, was an excellent interviewer also. So, and we worked very well together. And eventually we interviewed two of the offenders and got 2 confessions. And of course, then later on became the issue with court, which is a whole different story.
Yeah. David, last thoughts here?
Well, listening to Confessor, it's a humanistic approach to solving homicides. Think of that for a minute.
Absolutely.
I will say to the community news team, Grant, Michael Miller, Miller Brothers, Miami's Community News Network, Daniela Quevedo, behind the scenes, we can't thank you enough. We look forward to speaking with you in the next show. You can find us on all podcast platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, and of course, the betsandbadges.com website. Look forward to speaking with you. See you next time. Thank you.